One.
Good evening, everyone. We are so thrilled that you have joined us tonight. I am Lauren Sisler, sports reporter for ESPN. And on behalf of We Rise, I am honored to be here tonight alongside former NBA player, current Big Three player, artist, entrepreneur, Larry Sanders. And folks, the list goes on. The resume is huge. And Larry, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this very important conversation about mental health.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
You know, you'll quickly see a smile that lights up the room with Larry. And I've had the opportunity to talk with him here these past couple of days, and always a smile on his face. But Larry will tell you that being an elite athlete, being at the top of your game, doesn't always bring a smile to one's face. And underneath it all, there's been trauma, there's been anxiety, there's been depression. And you can't always trust what you see on the surface as it pertains to one's emotional health. And so, Larry, you know, first and foremost, I just want to start by, having you kind of tell us your story. And we're going to start this conversation out. And just to give the folks here watching us live just an idea of how this is going to go, we're going to spend the first 30 minutes, you and I, Larry, just sharing our story, some advice, some insight. And then we'll flip things to our audience and allow you guys to ask questions. So, you know, feel free to jump in, ask questions now. We'll get those curated and spend the last 15 or 20 minutes of this conversation answering those questions for you guys. And so, Larry, start out first and foremost, just sharing your story and sort of what landed you here today in a role that is very vocal and at the forefront of mental health.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you again for having me and allowing me to share my story. Yeah, I played in the NBA for almost 5 years, almost 6 years with the Milwaukee Bucks before I retired. But before that, I began playing basketball at a very later age in life. I was 16 when I started to play organized basketball. And before that, I wanted to be an oceanographer and an architect. And I just had these aspirations just to do more. And, it was always there inside of me. But I just took off with basketball. I got taller. I had great teachers who took their time with me and really were patient with a young kid that was just tall and didn't know much about the game. So I was fortunate, and my career kind of just took off. 6 years later, I got drafted into the NBA, number 15, and it happened like a flash. And it set me center stage, and I was able to see myself and really see my reactions in a way that I had never seen them before. And, I don't know if you follow my career, I led the league in technical fouls. It was me, Kobe, and Blake Griffin, we're top three, each year with Tex. And I was having this reaction. I was having this reaction to the referees and authority figures, and I had to retrace it. I had to understand myself and really why I was reacting this way on the stage, and not able to control my emotions. So as I start to dig into it and get therapy and understand anxiety and trauma, and a lot of what I had been through childhood was coming out now on this grand stage, and I had to get a hold of it for my, I didn't want to react this way. I didn't want to be this hothead player. I didn't want to take myself away from the game because I knew how I contribute to winning. Me, my defensive mindset and how I played, I directly see how I affect winning the game. So when I let someone get the best of me or the referee, it really let my team down, but it let me down a lot. And it made me really make me seek help in understanding myself because, it's just natural reaction, so to dig into it, anxiety, as I got to know it, it's this feeling of danger, you feel like your body feels like it's in danger for whatever reason, and the way trauma works, it stores in your nerves and your body. So your mind doesn't really, the timing when trauma happens, the timing gets displaced, and it can, whenever you get a trigger from that trauma, it doesn't matter, when it happens, you're gonna feel like you're in that same place that it happened in the beginning, So I was replaying these different trauma loops, and they had to break, And from my understanding, it's in the body. So mindfulness helped me a lot. I would meditate before every game. I would find myself just doing these mindful meditations where I would go inward, and just go from my toes to the top of my head and really try to feel my body and feel my insides before the game. And then I would meditate and take myself away from, any anxiety or stress, just my own quiet place in my mind. And I find myself, having these, just better games, better days, just help me with my overall stress and anxiety in life and how I manage it. So, basketball was a big blessing in that way, putting me on that stage to kind of see myself and address these issues that may have gone undressed if I had not been in that situation. And learning mindfulness techniques just really helped me. I do them to this day, and I'll be doing them forever. Because anxiety is one of those things that it comes up when it wants to. It's not like stress. It's the difference between stress and anxiety. Stress is like a real thing. It's like, hey, I gotta pay a bill. I got a paper due. That's stress. Anxiety it can just come out of nowhere. So. Just learn how to sit with it, let it be real, breathe through it, and be mindful. So that's my journey with mental health, and it's been a good one. It's been a good one.
Yeah, and I think being able to find that separation is kind of where you keyed in on being able to understand the difference of what that anxiety is versus stress. And obviously, right now we're in the middle of this pandemic, which is causing a lot of stress and anxiety for a lot of people, a lot of depression, the isolation and all those things. And I want to get into more of those techniques here in a little bit, some of the things that you have worked on and focused on that have really helped you in your journey, and maybe some of these call to action items that we can certainly look at. But I want to know from you, and you give some great insight because you are a professional athlete. You're on that big stage. So you're able to kind of see a reflection of yourself when you go back and maybe watch film and see how your reactions might be portrayed to the outside world. For you, though, as an athlete, what was really like the tipping point, and what really sent you to that next place to say, hey, nothing else matters right now but my mental health. I'm going to take care of it.
Honestly, okay, so there was this practice. That was my last practice in Milwaukee. And it was very, very, very mentally draining, as well as physically draining. And it was something I had really never experienced before. And I feel like there was a lot of mental distress in the atmosphere, So we were under a lot, and my body broke down first. I got a full body convulsion where even my ears were cramping up to like my toenails. Like there was nowhere on my body that I didn't feel a cramp. And I was in the hospital Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. After my body broke down, I couldn't mentally get myself to the space where I could even go to the gym, or look the coach in the face because of, the trauma that my body had inflicted. It went straight to my mind, and I knew immediately I needed like therapy. I needed like to go into like a unit, to go into a place where I could like get hands-on therapy every day, to address what I had gone through. And, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere. I would say it was kind of years of things. I suffered an eye injury, head trauma, and blew out my orbital, and I wasn't given a concussion test, and I wasn't handled right, by the organization. So there was a lot of distrust. There was like a lot of distrust already. I didn't trust them, and and then going into my body breaking down, it was just no more I could really pull out of myself mentally to get myself back there. So, at that point, I was already in therapy, and this was for marijuana use from the league, but it was beneficial, even though it was kind of felt more punishment based. It was beneficial for me because I was able to address some issues. But yeah, at that point, it was just too much. It was just too much. And, I knew I had to take the time to get myself better from not only myself, but my family. And I knew it at that point, if I wanted to go play basketball again, I would go play, but this needed time. This needed energy. This needed to be addressed. And I couldn't let it fall to the wayside any longer.
And I think one of the biggest things that we faced in society today, especially as it pertains to mental health, is the stigma that comes along with it. And people are so afraid to speak up and speak out because, you can walk into the hospital with, a broken arm or whatever it may be. And that's normal. But suddenly when you're talking about mental health, there's something wrong with you and people want to place you in a category and put a label on you. And I think that's something that we as a society are really trying to fight against right now. And I think that's why we're here tonight having this conversation and why Mental Health Awareness Month is designated this month. And We Rise is helping to bring awareness and attention to this. Right. And so for you, Larry, being able to be vocal and share your experience, especially as an elite athlete, someone that is out on the big stage, you're cashing those big paychecks, and really you're supposed to be the one that can go out there and fight through anything. You're supposed to be able to go out there and do your job, right? Because you're being paid to do your job, but you also are fighting through this internal battle with yourself. And so for you personally, what was the catalyst behind becoming a vocal, person in this conversation, being a vocal athlete and coming forward? Because really it wasn't until recently that we've heard more and more athletes and public figures coming forward and saying, this is a thing and we have got to address it. So what was the catalyst behind that?
I mean, and the athletic community and also like the African-American community where I'm from, like we don't talk about mental health. We don't address it. It's not, but we deal with it on a heavy, trauma is heavily embedded in our community. Like trauma is it becomes the norm, and then our reaction becomes the norm, and you have to learn how to unlearn some shit. Some stuff. Excuse my language.
It's okay, guys. It's okay.
Trauma's coming out of me. No, but yeah, you have to unlearn some stuff, and it's just embedded. So me being an athlete and then being African American, I feel like it was important for me to speak on it because, the labels, like that's how we isolate people. That's how we isolate people, and that's not healing. Like we come together and we heal because we're pack animals. Like we want to be together. So we have to normalize and understand mental health, like just like physical health, and that way we embed it in our community and no one feels left out. And we can all understand it because we all go do it in different levels. We're not afraid to talk about it and understand it. And that's it. Like, once we make it a thing that we all can understand and feel and connect with, will really begin to heal, because the conversation will be like so authentic and, the solutions are just like start pouring out, I believe.
Well, and I love what you said about being authentic, because just to give a little background on my story, because I believe we all have a story and we're all fighting through something in life. We're all facing various challenges, no challenge too big or too small to be addressed. When I was a freshman at Rutgers, I was a scholarship gymnast at Rutgers, and seemingly life was great. I was living out my dream, going to school on scholarship, getting my school paid for, and unfortunately, in my second semester, I got a phone call from my father that my mom had passed away with no explanation at all. My dad said to come home. He'll be at the airport to pick me up. And unfortunately, he never did show up. And both of my parents had passed away from prescription drug overdoses. And both of them had been going to a pain management doctor and just battling this addiction, but it was a silent battle with addiction. So here they are battling this addiction, trying to do everything they can to get out of bed in the morning with a smile on their faces. They were a huge integral part of my life and my brother's life. Always there for us as athletes, as kids, there to, kind of guide us through life and lift us up and our successes. But here they were living this different life, and this life of pain and just constant suffering of trying to not only cope with the pain, but also to cope with the stigma that was surrounding this addiction. And so for me personally, on the back end of that, it took me 7 years to even acknowledge how my parents passed away, because I was so afraid of the stigma that was attached to addiction. So I could never use the word addiction or overdose in the same sentence with both of my parents, because I felt like my legacy was bound in their hands. And if people knew the truth of how they passed away, then they would feel differently about who my parents were. They would feel differently about me and my family. And so I did everything in my power to sort of cover it all up. I would tell these sugar-coated stories of how they passed away, and, people would question it, but then they just kind of move on, right? You don't want to question too much. And so, like I said, it was 7 years before I acknowledged it. I had a very good support system from my family, from my aunt and uncle, Linda and Mike, and then of course my teammates and coaches at Rutgers. But I mean, it took a long time to break down those walls. And Larry, I think you can agree with this. When you have that stigma surrounding you, you constantly do everything you can to hide from it. And how can I put this on the shelf? And then all that trauma that you're experiencing internally continues to build. Mm-hmm. So it's this trauma that I'm constantly trying to get past. And I think that's the hardest part is the stigma that comes with it. And, I think anxiety and depression is a big part of that, and the mental health aspect. And it does lead down to roads of addiction and various substance abuse and things that certainly, come up in that. So, just going from that, I think one thing that I think about from you is I watched your Players Tribune interview, which was phenomenal. And this was a while back, and you were reciting your resume, which I thought was pretty cool. You as a person and not just the basketball player. And I think many people would kind of counter that argument and say, like, okay, you're a basketball player. You've got everything, right, Larry? Like, you literally have everything. You've got the fortune and the fame, and you're living your dream playing professional basketball. Why aren't you happy? I don't get it, right? But people on the outside can't understand that, because underneath it all, you're having to you're having this internal battle with yourself. And so how do you explain that to people on the outside that, you aren't a basketball player? You're Larry Sanders. You're not the former NBA player or, the guy out there, trading blows and, chasing people off the court. Like, you're Larry Sanders, and there's so much more to you than being a professional basketball player with fortune and fame.
Yeah, I would say I just go to like the root of it. Like, the game was made up, and before the game of basketball, people kind of valued something else maybe that people paid people for, like what was a gladiator or showman, or, it's like these jobs and these positions in life were created before I was born, and people were like told to kind of clap, or they clap because it's exciting to look at, and I understand that. But the value isn't in that. It's a game. The value is in like inspiring somebody, or like making someone's day better, or, that's why I wanted to be a basketball player, because I didn't want to play it. I didn't watch it. I didn't participate in it. I had a basketball with me wherever I went because it protected me. And like, it was my way to go from my grandmother's house to my mom's house to my dad's house, because they lived in different hoods, and like it's a lot of gang violence where I'm from. Like, every street corner has their set of gang, and gangs. And so I had to travel with my basketball in order to like be left alone, but I didn't play. So, I didn't really understand the game. I didn't fall in love with it right away. I'm a person with dreams and aspirations, and I think we all can be very talented, and someone can be like, yo, your talent is worth, so much money, and, people are going to value you. But like, it's just a talent, and, if you can do something with it and affect somebody. Like I said, I didn't want to be a ball player, but I went to my first NBA game, and it was a Miami Heat game. And Alonzo Mourning called. We were way up at the top, and this was before the game. And Alonzo Mourning, he like called all the kids down to the court, and he's like tossing the ball with us. And I'm 15 years old, and this is my first NBA game, and I'm looking at this dude. I don't know him who he is, but I'm like, he gave me this feeling. I'm like, damn, I want to be that. Like, I want to be like this guy. Like, I want to bring kids. Like if you ever see me for a game, every game I'm like with the kids. Like, I'm throwing the ball to them, grabbing kids out of the stands, because I just remember how good that made me feel, and like that's why I wanted to do it. You know what I mean? And it happened for me, and I was able to shine that light. And I think it turned on me a little bit, because I saw the ugly side of the NBA. And you got to remember, I was a kid who had dreams to like do a lot of the stuff. So when I saw the ugly side of the NBA, I felt bad for kind of telling kids to go to the NBA. I kind of felt bad for being like, yo, go be an NBA player. Like, like I wanted to go be like, yo, dream big. Like, go own a team, own the NBA team, or, just dream bigger. You know what I'm saying? Because, it's a high percentage of guys who end up losing their money after they play. Understanding business and playing in the NBA is two different things, and they both take time. They both take dedication. You just don't get business savvy after you leave the NBA. There are pros and cons to this game. It's pros and cons to it for your future, for your life. Money. Someone can hit the lottery. People hit the lottery every day. They don't usually keep it, because money is a science to it, and there's an education to it. So, when I saw a lot of young guys, like me, come up in the NBA and not really be knowledgeable when it came to their finances, and get robbed, or taxes don't get filed, or they're not making the right investment in plays. That's so stressful. And then you're making this money, but you can't keep it because you're not putting it in the right spot. You can buy stuff that looks cool. You post it on Instagram. People can like the picture. What does that do for your future? So, it's just pros and cons, man. And, I would tell any kid that had aspirations to go be a professional athlete. Right?
Well, and I think it's interesting you point that out, because I think people want to put a price tag on everything. So your price tag of happiness might look different than someone else's price tag, right?
Right.
I'm a car fiend. I'll tell you that right now. I grew up, around cars my entire life. That's probably one thing that my vice in life. I love cars, whether it's foreign cars or muscle cars, you name it. But I mean, everyone has that price tag, and you talk about comparisons, and I think this is such an important thing to bring up and an awareness, because you talk about authenticity. And what I find social media, unfortunately, and I know that social media does a lot of great things, like bringing us this opportunity to talk with people right now all over the country, and to be able to have this conversation virtually. But what I find with social media, especially, look, there are 24 hours in a day, and you think about it on social media. When someone snaps a picture and they throw it up there, like you said, whether they want to, show off the private jet they're flying on, or the cool new kicks they have, you're seeing 1 second of somebody's day, right?
Right.
You're seeing 1 second. But what about the other seconds and the minutes and the hours that are inside that day? You're seeing the highlights of someone's life. And so you're certainly seeing what they want you to see.
Right.
But you're not seeing everything else. And I think that's where these false perceptions of what makes people happy and what is supposed to be societal, from a society standpoint, what acceptance, what out there is supposed to make you happy, because what makes me happy is certainly not going to make you happy, and vice versa. Right. And so I think that people need to have that realization that it's so important to kind of drop the comparisons and be authentic and be true to yourself and love yourself and forgive yourself. And, to be able to kind of have that sense of awareness that, hey, like, you can dream big. And I think it's so important to dream. I think it's so important to chase after those dreams. But to your point, it doesn't have to be in the same fashion. Your ceiling may be completely different than someone else's. And so, I think that really helps shift the focus to eliminating some of those comparisons, and obviously what we consider to be, putting someone on a pedestal and, essentially worshiping something, or, idolizing something that, really can in some ways be the bearer of bad news, and can create a lot more problems, as you've kind of outlined. And that kind of brings me to this question, Larry. You talk about sort of how you were treated in the league, and obviously, throughout your sports career. First of all, I got to say, VCU guy, Virginia is for lovers. I'm Virginia, my home state, so I got to give a shout out to my home state of Virginia. I'm from the Roanoke Blacksburg area. Grew up in a little small town in Giles County. So shout out to my home people there. But what I got to say, so you've competed at the highest level, right? So you compete at the college level, then you transition to the professional level. Do you think athletes in general, especially at the collegiate and or professional levels, really are kind of given those proper tools to maintain a healthy state of mind?
I think it goes back to the stigmas that we talked about and the labels, and how guys are afraid to seek help because they think that it could damage their future. Like word can get out that I need, that I'm a damaged product, and maybe it can trickle down from the top, and the NBA can really revisit their mental health policy and their business model so that it doesn't seem like, oh, well, if you're a damaged good or product, you're just going to be replaced by another, or traded off to a different team, or going to be somebody else's issue, like mental health. Like I said, when it becomes real, like physical health, like ankle injury, or, because they address that seriously, and they say, hey, you can't sit down, you can't play for 6 months, and hey, you got a torn ACL, but anxiety and depression doesn't get that same respect. When it does, guys will feel way better with like coming to them and tapping into their emotions and actually trying to figure out how they feel, not just ignoring it to go play basketball. They're going to actually try to, get down to the bottom of it. But, maybe it'll trickle down from the top because guys, it's about the stigmas and the labels. And, guys are thinking about their future, and guys don't want to, be labeled. And then on the grand scheme of things, outside of the career, no one wants to be outcasted. We want to be pack animals. We want to be around each other. We want to feel normal, whatever that is. So let's make mental health normal. That's what we have to do.
Yeah. And, I think back to obviously my transition from gymnastics at the club level, and then transitioning to the collegiate level. And I kind of laugh about this, but it's sort of like, when you're sort of on your own, and that's kind of how it was at the club level in gymnastics, because there was no high school gymnastics, right? So, I think about like the injury aspect and how college became such a business, because I remember, broken bones left and right, broken toes, broken fingers, like just get back up there and keep working, right? Well, you get to college and suddenly I've got a toe sticking out that way. And they're like, all right, you got to put a boot on and sit down for 3 weeks. And I'm like, wait a sec, what is this? And now suddenly you're a liability. Right. And so it kind of just makes me think about that transition and how I can relate that to where, college athletics does become a business. And so suddenly you're kind of entering into this different territory. And I guess I would ask you, where do you think programs and organizations could do a better job? What are maybe some suggestions or advice or things that you think an organization can do, whether it is an athletic organization or even businesses, especially we're in the midst of this pandemic, and people need direction. They need insight. They need hope. They need anything they can get. So as we enter back into maybe what we call the new normal, how can organizations really help people to transition, whether it is athletics or it is in the workforce, to really help them in that mental state of mind and to really improve that going forward?
I think mindfulness practice, meditation, incorporating things like this into the regular scheduled practice, before practice, breath work, after practice, breath work, like really tapping into the core and the body, like that's the root of it. And then the thoughts start to spawn and you start to go into these loops and, so I think that, nutrition, being athletic, again, is just going to help in general. That's going to help your mental health, just being able to run and jump and have physical contact. But, let's not go in it just ignoring everything that we've been through just because we can just go run and jump again. This could easily happen again on a bigger scale, and, I always tell people like electricity can just go, like it can. And then, we're back to the basics. Really learn how to channel the anxiety and use it. Don't like suppress it and try to ignore it. Understanding what the depression is, how it forms, how an attitude, can form into, a mood and a temperament, and how it develops into depression. Like let's figure out ways to nip it in the bud when you start to feel it creeping up. And it's just knowledge and understanding. So I feel like they can definitely do better with the education. We educate the coaches and the top first. You educate everyone in the front office, and then you go down to the players, and I think they'll feel real comfortable.
Yeah, I think the education and awareness is such a critical part of all this, and kind of getting everybody on the same page to really acknowledging and understanding and accepting that mental health is just as critical, if not even more critical, because as an athlete, that the mental aspect of it is, I don't even know if you could say a 50-50 split, because to me as a former gymnast, I know the mental aspect of it was such a tremendous part of the sports game, and obviously a huge component to what we did every day. And that's not just getting up on the balance beam or getting up on the apparatus and competing. That is just from every standpoint, mentally being able to, function every day, get out of bed in the morning, make the right decisions and be able to live out a life, beyond the sport, obviously. And so, as we continue our discussion here, Larry, I just want to remind everyone, if you guys have questions, guys and gals out there, please send us your questions. We'd love to answer them, as we close things out at the top of the hour. So please send us your questions if you got them. Larry, I do want to ask you, you talk about some of those mindfulness exercises. We're in the midst of a pandemic. A lot of us are in isolation. We're trying to figure out, there's no blueprint for this, right? There's no manual for how this thing works. But you and I talked a little bit yesterday, and I kind of love what you said about constantly trying something new and we're really doing exercises with your mind, working out your mind, right? And it's not just about the physical workouts, it's the mental workouts. What are some things you are personally doing, especially during this time where you're in that isolation, that are really helping you sort of push through this and kind of change your overall mental health and perception and perspective?
Yeah. Well, before the whole pandemic happened, I was on this role of I started doing affirmations in the morning, and I think I might be 8 months in now, maybe a little longer. But I do affirmations, and then I write my intentions out. I write my blessings, and then I write a letter to God, and it just reminded myself of who I am and my intentions for the day, and how blessed I am to have this day and to have this start, and I can go out and be a blessing, and sometimes you have to remind yourself that, so that's something I do, daily, and it's just keeping a promise to myself. I think as a kid, my dad didn't show up, a lot. I was let down by different family members, from my child perspective, not knowing everything that's going on. So, I keep little promises to myself to, to kind of rebuild that in me, so things like that, just knowledge. There's an app called Breathe that I participate in, and it gives me this master class that I get to do every day with anxiety. And that's just, it's 20 minutes that I get to do before I start my day, and I'm listening to just techniques and, how other people have gone through it. YouTube, going through my chakras, learning about, that. And, I do believe we are beams of light and vibrations. So, the whole shot, that makes sense to me. So, just every day, just it's a journey, but I keep that promise to myself because, I understood that, I was a kid that went through different things. And, first, that inner journey, I think everybody, it's so personal. It's personal. It's a personal tailor fit journey and recipe for you and your healing that I think everyone can tap into, but you kind of got to look inward at like some of the things you might not want to look at. And, start with just write a letter to your inner child, write a letter to the 6-year-old you. Tell your 6-year-old you what you would want to say about the pandemic and how what the world is now and what to prepare for, and, maybe just rebuild the relationship with yourself to start there. And I think some of the answers will start to unfold and the universe will start to bring some things to you, and um, it'll be exciting. And it won't always be like the best days, it'll be some struggling, but, I feel like life is about struggle. It's not like I'm telling you how to get to a grand, peaceful place with golden gates. No, you're going to go through more struggle. You're going to go through more anxiety. You're going to go get maybe some more depression. But what I'm saying is that, the journey of it, you start to enjoy the journey. And that's, struggle is going to happen to everyone. It's like feeling like you're struggling for a reason. It's feeling like you got something to struggle for is what keeps us alive, So just falling in love with the struggle, and being thankful that you have the opportunity to struggle. Like existence is a blessing. Like it really is, So yeah, I would just say take some time with yourself, and this is the perfect time to do it. Right. So.
Well, you make me want to like get up and run around this room right now. I'm like so inspired. I'm like, man, you are just pouring it on right now. I love it. Oh, I love that. I really, pen and paper. You, my friend, have a lot of takeaways from this conversation. I just love that to really discover who you are. And I think that's such a big part of it. And, one thing I'll say in sort of my journey with the challenges, you talk about that, because I think life is filled with disappointments. And I'll tell you right now, I'm set to get married May 30th. We were supposed to have a big 200 plus wedding in Virginia, near my hometown, where both me and my fiance are from. And of course that was canceled because of the pandemic. And so, as a little girl, this is something I dreamed of my entire life, walking down that aisle. That's one disappointment. The other disappointment is my dad won't be here to walk me down the aisle. We are still getting married May 30th in a church here in Alabama, and it's going to be me and 8 family members on both sides, and so a much different vision than what I had. And my dad won't be there to walk me down the aisle, so another disappointment. And life is full of those disappointments, but I think it's really how do you take those disappointments and take those challenges and do something positive? And I go back to where I was 7, 8, 9 years ago, when I was afraid to tell people how my parents died. I was afraid of my story. And I think where I kind of discovered this, awakening within myself and this identity crisis I was having was in the fact that I suddenly have this platform. So as a sports reporter, I'm telling all these people's stories. So, I would tell your story, Larry, but then, oh, by the way, I can't even be honest with my own story because I'm ashamed of it. So how are you as an athlete supposed to trust me if I'm out here, giving a false sense of myself to everyone else? And so one thing I always love to say is, you say fall in love with the challenges, fall in love with adversity. I say fall in love with your story, because we all have a story, I believe. And I believe that those stories, it's sort of the fabric of who we are. And so I think that if you can fall in love with your story, and fall in love with who you are, and be able to share that with the world in any capacity, whether it's the person next to you or the 50 people in front of you. If you're able to do that, I think that it brings so much power, and it alleviates some of that weight. I was shackled to the shame for so many years, and all of a sudden those shackles just come off, and I feel this freedom now because I'm being truthful with myself and who I am, and having that identity. And I think it's just so important to be able to do that. And I feel, Larry, that's exactly what you're doing. And you're being able to be a voice for other people. You're being able to use your talent as, a basketball player, as the trauma that you've experienced throughout your entire life, to help other people. You are that vessel of hope for people. And I think that is just, that's why we're here, right? I think that if we can find our purpose in life, it can take us places we never imagined. So I guess kind of transitioning a little bit, you talk about some of the exercises, Larry, that you've done and whatnot. And I think trauma is kind of a centerpiece of what we've been talking about here, and things sort of coming back to the surface, especially during COVID-19, because it could be a trigger for, the trauma and things that you might have experienced when, you were younger, or even in more recent years. How have you personally been able to sort of deal with those emotions and sort of navigate your thoughts into a positive direction? And maybe what advice could you give people out there that might be experiencing some of that same trauma and some of those same emotions?
Yeah, like I said, just something that makes you feel good, and keeping that promise to yourself, whether it's writing something or journaling or drawing a picture. Really, it's going to be hard. That's a very hard task to do. Just that task alone, because when you deal with, it's like the love. We kind of don't understand the power of the words we say to ourselves. Like, you can say, "Damn, I'm a fuck up," or excuse me, "Damn, I'm a this or that," or you can curse yourself when you stump your toe, or it's so easily, like, you can say you did something wrong. But I feel like that, for us as a society, needs to be reversed. Like, we need to be able to compliment ourselves just as easily as we curse ourselves. And it starts with, you're gonna get angry and you're gonna explode, or you might get angry and you may say something that you really don't mean. But instead of sitting with that for days and letting that turn into regret, and you get to a point where you can remind yourself of who you are, that don't neglect the end. You might have been selfish, but you also are giving and loving, and you might be scared, but you're brave too. You're a lot of things, and sometimes you just have to remind yourself that you have to do it. You can't wait for Instagram to do it. You can't wait for your mom to do it. You can't wait for anyone else. You have to kind of drive your own boat. And I would just say start there. And if you're to a point where you're keeping promises to yourself, and I truly believe you'll feel better, and you'll start to, like, really put yourself first. Like, like, no matter what, I gotta do this for myself today. And not gonna make you a perfect being, but that recharge is important. That refresher is important. It's important for me. So.
Yeah, we all need one of those buttons over there, the reset button, right? When you hit that reset button, hit reset, refresh. And I love what you said there. Do not neglect the and, because I think that is so very important. All right, so we got about 15 minutes left, and we got a couple questions from our viewers that we want to go ahead and answer. So if you guys want to pop those up on the screen so we can go ahead and answer those questions for you. See if they come up on the screen here while we're waiting for those to hop on. There we go. All right, so J Truex 13 wants to know what can leagues or schools be doing better to support the mental health of their athletes and their fans? So we talked about this a little bit before, but what do you think are some action things that people can be doing at any level, whether it's at, the Pop Warner, the Pee Wee leagues, on up through college and obviously professional sports?
I would say get to know really get to know like the nervous system. I mean, because I think if you really, this is what I think about. I think every injury results in a head injury because everything goes back to the brain. Everything, like every physical and trauma that you go through, it's also mental. There's a mental component to it that just gets ignored. So I think once we start addressing that, even at like the smaller levels, we'll be able to. You'll see guys responding better, not getting as hurt, recovering a lot faster. Being better, and I think it's a respect thing. It's a respect thing. You got to respect the mental, and we can all do a better job at that. And it'll start with the education component, and then yeah.
I think that's so interesting that you point to that, because you do have that element, like you said, and we've talked about it, prior to this, just, the injuries. It's not just the physical, and there is trauma, mental trauma that goes along with any injury that we face, any challenge or roadblock that we face. And so I think that's such a great question and a great way to look at it. I think the education does come first, and really being able to equip everyone with that, because nobody's exempt from, the circumstances. Nobody's exempt from the challenges. And, I don't care if you're the coach of the team, you're the star athlete. I think everyone needs to go take a trip to the bench, sit down, and really, have this opportunity to bring this awareness and put this focus on the educational aspect and the mental health component, because I do think it is going to make us stronger. Because I think you see some of your best athletes are not the ones that obviously that, have the skill set, right? It comes with so much more, right? Yep. Like what you have in your mind and that mental space. And that comes down to every little component of it, down to the nutrition of it, the strength and the core of who we are. So I think that's extremely important. I think we have one more question from the audience that we're waiting for them to pop up. Let's see if we've got that ready for us. All right. So Danielle on Facebook says, do you think that with the removal of routine in this crisis, that some athletes will struggle more? So routine is helpful, and now we are losing some of that with this uncertainty. I think that's a great question, Danielle. And I think that, some of the coaches I've listened to talking, since all of this happened, I know, i.e. one of them being Alabama head coach Nick Saban, more recently just talked about how this is going to really impact, the younger athletes, because you are making that transition. And Larry, you can probably speak to this because, as an athlete, when you do transition, I mean, let's be real, like there's a massive difference between high school athletics and then you transition to college. And then all of a sudden the same thing from college to professional athletics, to becoming a professional athlete. That structure is now gone. So how much do you think this will be an impact on athletes that are dealing with this crisis and going through this?
Well, I would say that's a great question. And to answer that question, I would say making a routine for yourself is so important. When I first left the NBA, it was abrupt. I left in the middle of the season. It was like all-star break, retired. It happened so fast. And before, it was like the chains were off. So immediately, I had this sense of freedom, but all of a sudden misery kind of started to creep in, and uncertainty and it's like, okay, I need to make a schedule for myself. I've had someone tell me what I need to do for 10 years straight, every morning. And now I don't have a routine, and I found myself kind of having this idle mind that it wasn't resourceful. So I would say that is important for athletes and just people in general who used to having the routine of a boss or the routine, and now they're just sitting there waiting for the day to hit them, and it's like that doesn't work. that misery is gonna hit you. that's what's waiting for you. So you gotta create your schedule and kind of take charge of your day. And then what you were saying about the transition, that's crazy because I remember that summer before I went to college, or that summer before I got to the NBA, like we played so much basketball. Like there's so much basketball to be played in this transition area right now where guys can't do it. For the draft purposes, for summer basketball coming up, and hopefully this will be over in the summer where guys can have that contact, because those younger players are going to need to go to their and play with those pros and be around those vets leading into the season.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing like that human interaction. And I've talked to several, football players that obviously just entered into the NFL draft, and they said that was one of the toughest things for them. They can go out and they can throw the ball. They can obviously run drills and train and obviously keep their strength up. But they said one of the most challenging parts of it was being able to have that face-to-face interaction, being able to, talk with the scouts and talk with the teams. They were able to do so obviously virtually, but there's just something about that human interaction and that aura, I think, that is put off when people are together in a social setting. And so I think that, you make some very good points about that and how this can certainly be challenging and how we get back to that. So Larry, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, what are ways that you have personally been staying connected with family and friends and those closest in your network to kind of still maintain that sense of interaction that we're talking about?
Just checking up on everybody, calling people, and it's just checking up on my friends, on my family, FaceTiming my loved ones, teaching my dad how to use it.
Was that a challenge?
First I had to get him the iPhone, and then it took him like 6 months to use the FaceTime, but now he got the FaceTime. But
that's awesome.
So we're dealing with that now. So it's always it's just making sure like I'm bringing myself to the table, and I'm being a blessing to them when I do speak to them. When I am around them, and enjoying them. I'm enjoying this time. It's not always the best days, but I'm enjoying it.
Well, and I love to hear that. And I think that again, this kind of takes you back to social media, because I do think, again, social media does keep us connected. But sometimes I think what also happens is you're seeing a timeline and you're seeing people's lives as it's sort of playing out on social media. So I think that, let's just say pre-pandemic, it's easier to say, well, I kind of know what's going on in their life. I don't need to check in on them. But I think this is a fantastic reminder that, that interaction, picking up the phone, having that face-to-face, whether it's on a Zoom call or obviously we're here on Skype and on various network channels and whatnot, to have that face-to-face interaction or that voice-to-voice interaction that you're not getting through words on a screen or through a picture or a video feed, on somebody's Instagram account or whatever it may be. So I think that's super important, and obviously, can help us all to push through this pandemic and obviously push through these times that we're faced, but also equip us and empower us for the future and whatever that may hold. And so, Larry, I just want to say thank you. And before we go, so, your resume, we were talking before, your resume, we got your little lower third there. That's what we call those in TV, your lower third. So it says Larry Sanders, former NBA player, current Big Three player, artist, I see. So it's funny because you said, hey, can we add entrepreneur to that? Absolutely, because I want to hear about your ventures. Tell us a little bit more about sort of what you're up to these days and some of your business ventures. We all want to hear about it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I just invested in this new product called Click, which is really dope. It's like it's a spray. It's like an old school Banaka, and we're releasing it soon. I do my music stuff. That's like my passion that I'll be doing forever. So still, I think I'm gonna release an album in June. It'll be like mostly instrumentals, like some poetry and some storytelling, and maybe a little bit of rap, just a little bit. I just developed 2 TV shows, and I'm working on my second movie also, and second book. So um, I'm hoping to put something on the screen soon, and people can see it and watch it and actually like enjoy my body of work. Um, and yeah, I like to be creative. I'm staying active, and um, I really take entrepreneurship like seriously because it's a wave of emotions. And I started out with the artist incubator called Citizens of Matter, where I housed 5 artists of different genres. So I had a R&B singer, a fashion designer, a screenwriter, a photographer, a model, and I managed them, and we shot videos and went to meetings together, and I kind of just used face value to kind of open doors for them. Um, and that was like my real first stage of entrepreneurship and really doing something that I was passionate about and loved. And it transformed to a clothing line. So I do clothing now, and custom jeans, and I'm working with different designers to uh, to come out with different lines for people, women and men. So I'm super active, and I love it. I wake up with something to do every day, so I feel great, more than something to do, and then yeah, so that's a pretty good few of my ventures, but I stay active. So
I love it. I'm not gonna lie. I was definitely checking out your clothing line there on Instagram. Pretty cool stuff.
thank you.
Might have to.
How tall are
Might
you?
have to. Might have. I'm 5'9".
Okay.
Probably the tallest Division I gymnast you'll ever meet, ever.
Right.
Way too tall, but yes, I'm 5'9". So yeah.
Jeans now, some like really nice zippers, like patchwork. You'll be like,
Okay. Well, me and you are going to talk after this call, so I'll make sure I sport some of those. And what are those jeans called? What's the company?
calm. So Citizens of Matter.
Citizens of Matter. I love it. Well, Larry, again, as we're wrapping things up, I appreciate your time so much, your insight, so much great advice, so many great takeaways from this conversation. You just pour your heart out there, and you do it with a smile, and you do it with purpose. And I think that is so meaningful. So, any final words, anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the platform. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Lauren, for this interview. So I'm happy to do it, and I would love to chat again if you guys want me.
Absolutely. Well, for more of these great conversations, you can check out We Rise, the We Rise calendar at werise.la. Also follow We Rise LA on social media for great info, news, and updates. Of course, you can check out Larry's social media feed. He's got some great stuff there on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. And we just appreciate all of you for tuning in, for watching, and being part of this great conversation. And I just want to say again, thank you to Larry, and to all of you out there. Stay safe and be kind to yourselves. Much love.